To jest Radio Szczecin. Radio Szczecin.
Okay, so it's Jules Buckley on Radio Szczecin. Hello.
Hi.
How are you? How is your time going in Szczecin?
I'm having an ace time. We've really enjoyed coming here and visiting the city and working with this incredible orchestra and meeting all these really cool people.
You know, I'm gonna start with a quote from conductor Jimek Radzimir Dębski. I don't know if you know him, but he said that he enjoys taking art from, let's call it the streets, like maybe hip-hop music, etc., and putting it into galleries or concert halls. You also did many projects with mixing different things, like playing grime with the orchestra, or dance music. So, you know, what drives you in choosing those projects? Is it about the challenges or, you know, stretching the boundaries?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when I was younger, I was super anti-establishment, especially in the orchestral world, because I just thought it was so conservative, and often, you know, there would be this preconception in the general public that classical music was very elitist, which of course it is not. The thing is, my upbringing was really one of a love of jazz music and pop music. And then when I eventually kind of went in to study classical composition, the three strands in some ways came together. So at a certain point, I found myself, instead of being a trumpet player, I found myself in front of an ensemble. And I realized that I felt what I had to offer orchestras or large ensembles was perhaps, an understanding of current sounds, current production, you know, groove work, stuff that might be a little bit more uncommon to, let's say, traditional state-led orchestras, simply because of the history of the music that a lot of them play.
Is it true that when you were working on Amita Classics or dance classics, some people, let's call them, you know, classical music lovers, they were like against it? They objected?
Oh yeah, man, people were trashing it before they'd even heard it. But they were trashing it because they'd made a judgment in advance that I was going to take like Tchaikovsky and kind of cross that over with like Carl Cox or something. And of course that's ridiculous. I mean, my concept and many of my close colleagues is all about, you know, whatever music you're working on, whatever you're doing, whichever project, you need to go in so many levels deep to really understand the nuts and bolts and the roots of the tree. And I feel like if you do that and you do it with integrity, you're all cool. Of course, the other thing is that you shouldn't really care what people think anyway, otherwise you won't play a single note and you won't write a note.
But do you think there are any genres in music that it wouldn't be possible to play them with an orchestra?
No. But the question is which orchestra and, you know, how's it put together? For me, it's all about the concept, really. Of course, let's put it like this, like if we brought like a Cuban program to Szczecin, then maybe initially the guys might be a little bit more wary of it, because the understanding of the rhythms is something that, for example, if you're born in Cuba, you grow up with this music, so it's inside your DNA in the same way that if you learn the violin from 3 or 4 years old, then, you know, perhaps the great composers, that's also in your DNA. So it just takes time to get the message across, and it takes time to understand the feeling of the music, because it's not about reading it, it's not about reading up about it, it's about feeling it, ultimately.
Regarding mixing music with an orchestra, I really love how hip-hop music is played with, you know, classical music, like maybe, for instance, Nas did it. Or there was a concert, Dresden Soul Symphony with Bilar Oltweet. Do you have your favorite arrangements of soul or hip-hop music with an orchestra?
Good question. I mean, there are some incredible arrangers worldwide right now. You know, I mean, I think on the soul stuff, I've got a close team of, I guess, buddies, and we work together all the time from the States. I've got a good friend, Tim Davis. He's an excellent arranger. And then there's guys like in Serbia, Vladimir Nikolov. He's a phenomenal arranger. In the UK, Tom Richards, Tommy Lawrence, who wrote a lot of the stuff tonight with me. I mean, Evan Jolly, there's many incredible arrangers. And then you've got the jazz guys like Vince Mendoza, Micah Benny, Jim McNeely. There's an incredible team of arrangers worldwide, and often they're sort of like the ghost artist behind the scenes that often, you know, they're often unsung heroes, really, and they're the ones that actually create the sound for the orchestra. It's the orchestra's job to shape that sound, but they're the guys that are arranging it, you know, and writing it.
And if you were to recommend like a song in that style to play on our show, what would it be?
Well, I think you need to go back to, like, for me, you should go back to the roots. So it'd either be like 60s Motown or early 70s, mid to late 70s disco. I think for fun and to put people in a good mood. I think the Tramps' Disco Inferno, it's got an incredible string arrangement and an incredible horn arrangement, and the vocals are killer. You literally can't beat it.
Okay, so we will play it for sure. And regarding soul musicians, you worked with Michael Kiwanuka, Laura Mbula, or Emily Sandé. You know, how does it happen? Do they want to do their music in a different setting, or maybe you reach out to people that you want to work with?
It can be both. I mean, I've always been quite kind of proactive in reaching out to music composers and artists if I've got a concept. So yeah, I reached out to Laura about that idea, and Michael, that was a connection between Metropole Orchestra and his team. But yeah, it can be both, but I guess my sort of vibe is I complete one project and then I always look to make the next project so far away from the last one that it's got to challenge me. I need to remain a student of the music always, and if I feel like I'm repeating myself, then I'm going to do something else.
But if you're working with pop artists, is it like difficult to work with people from different backgrounds? Some people may not have worked with an orchestra before. Yeah,
for me that's something that I guess maybe it's one of my sort of working strengths, that I feel like I can translate well between an orchestral ensemble and an artist from any background, and I think that's probably just because of the music that I was introduced to from a very young age, and it was very broad. It was a lot of soul, it was a lot of jazz, it was opera, it was a lot of classical music, it was a lot of free jazz, experimental music, it kind of a hell of a lot of disco. I mean, in the 80s when I was a kid, you know, everybody listened to the radio, right? You didn't have Spotify, you didn't have iTunes, you didn't have mobile devices, and in a way I felt like I was more aware of full albums and journeys that artists would take on their projects then than I am now, because of course now you get Spotify and you jump from one tune to the next. So I'm grateful for that time in a way, but I'm also grateful for my mobile device.
Do you remember the first record that you bought?
Yeah, the first record I bought, are we talking vinyl or like tape?
Vinyl.
Ooh, it was definitely like a funk record. It probably was something like, wow, that's a really tough one. I mean, there was a period of time around mid-90s where I was going into like junk shops in the town I'm from in England, and I was raiding the vinyl collections, and I think the first thing I was looking for Isaac Hayes Shaft, I was looking for Saturday Night Fever, I was looking for any Motown, but I think Get on the Good Foot, James Brown was definitely like one of my most favourite purchases. Oh man, there's so many, it's almost impossible I mean, Miles Davis, the first CD I bought was Miles Davis Kind of Blue. I think when I got my hand on Sketches of Spain, this incredible Gil Evans arrangement, that was one of my most favourite treasured vinyls at that time. But then Herbie Hancock, Thrust, yeah, Headhunters, probably like a Headhunters vinyl was my favourite one of the time, stuff like that. Yeah, anything that was funk based, it was great.
Okay, so those are really solid choices, really great records. And talking about your childhood, I know you had some ideas about your future profession. I read something that you wanted to be an actor probably, or something like that. And then you were a trumpeter. And how did it happen that you ended up here?
Yeah, that's a really good, it's funny, actually no one's ever asked me that question before. That's really funny and cool. Yeah, when I was about 6 or 7, my mum, she's an actor, and I was doing lots of stuff with her as a kid, and I really got into it, and I really enjoyed, I guess it's the feeling that you can express yourself, you know. So that kind of started off, but then at a certain point when I was 9, I picked up the trumpet at school. They were offering lessons to learn an instrument. I saw on the piece of paper, it said like saxophone, trumpet, trombone or something, and I thought, being an absolute loser, I thought that the trombone was the sax, because I didn't know what it was called. So I went to this meeting with the teacher, and she pulled out this you know, this long extending instrument, and I was like, that's not the trombone. No, she was like, no, it's definitely a trombone. I was like, well, what's the one that's got like a curve in it? She's like, that's the sax. I was like, oh, okay. So I tried the trombone, I sucked at it, and then she was like, well, what about the trumpet? And then I tried that, and it worked a bit better, and that was sort of the beginning, really. So as soon as that happened, for me, it was like you know, you strike a match, and that was kind of the beginning of realising all of the positive effects of music. Having done so many things in your music career, can you name like the most challenging or the most difficult task? I think the most difficult challenge I've had to take would be, I suppose there's practical ones, like once I agreed to do a Michel Legrand ballet in Hamburg. I remember they phoned me up and were like, hey, like, the conductor can't do it. Would you be up for stepping in? And I thought, okay, cool, it's just going to be like a load of swinging stuff and let's do it. And then I met the conductor at the central station and picked up the scores, and it was like a goddamn opera, like a 2.5 hour thing, and it was super complex, and I didn't have much time to learn it, and I didn't have a rehearsal, so I had to go in and do the gig. Ballet dancers, there was a big band on stage, there was an orchestra in the pit, and I needed to sync them up. I'd never met them before. I didn't know how they played rhythmically. I didn't know how they interpreted what I was going to do. And I think, so practically, that was the biggest challenge. But artistically, for me, the biggest challenge is staying open, and if anything I'm writing, really staying true to myself with what I'm composing, and not giving a shit about what other people think or whether they like it or not. I think that's a challenge, because anyone that goes through any musical education system, the way they box it up and the way they kind of structure it means that you can't help but be influenced by this historical line. And at a certain point, anyone that's ever composed anything looks in the mirror and says to themselves, is this any good? And I think chatting to Jacob, it's great about this sort of stuff, because he's very free of mind and he does his thing. And I really love that and respect that. And I think that's, for me, it will always be the biggest challenge, is just to stay open.
You came to Szczecin to be a part of a concert with Quincy Jones music, with Jacob as well. But I know that you've met him before. It was like a time that he conducted when you were on stage. Is that right?
Yeah, well, we're doing 2 more gigs together next month. We're going to go to London and we're going to go to Paris with Quincy. I've met him several times, and in a way you can almost say that for me it's a labour of love at the moment, working with him on his music and helping him to put it together and present it. Hopefully it continues for a bit.
Okay, so you already won a Grammy, you are taking part in many concerts. What's next for you? After you leave Szczecin, what are your plans regarding music or shows?
I've got, in the summer, I'll be returning to the BBC Proms with 2 orchestras. One is Metropole Orchestra from the Netherlands. We're going to be doing a concert of the music of Nina Simone with Ledisi and Lisa Fischer, 2 incredible American singers. And then in September, we'll be at the same festival with the Heritage Orchestra, which is my English group, and we're going to be doing a project which is basically the history of the breaks. So anyone that's into hip-hop and anyone that's into funk and into like breaking or break dancing as it can be called, essentially it's going to be a concert, 90 minutes back to back, of all of the history of the breaks. So everything from like the funky drummer through to like the Mexican, with the best breaking crews I can find and scratch DJs and stuff. So that one's going to require some homework.
Yeah, so those concerts with Nina Simone's music and the breaks, this will be like a one-time thing, or you plan to, maybe record it or play in different places?
The Nina Simone project, we're also going to do a show in Amsterdam about a week later, and hopefully we could maybe do some more shows of that in future. And for the breaks, the same. I think we'd be looking to expand that concept, in Europe and beyond probably.
Okay, so I hope we get a chance to see it or, listen to it. So it was Jules Buckley on Radio Szczecin. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for chatting to me, and thanks for the support of good music.
Radio Szczecin.